why did I buy an RX-8? Because I couldn't afford an S2000? At the time, I was what, 18 years old, 19 years old? So I guess I was 19, and my first car had gotten totaled, and I wanted something that was fun. So I was looking at kind of sports cars in the price range I had, and the RX-8s were cool, rotary engines were cool, so decided to go down that path.
Cool.
These days, the RX-8 is, if you're going to do any form of motorsports, it's a great platform. And for the money, I mean, you can go buy, which I know sounds bad, you buy a non-running, blown motor RX-8 for like less than $2,000. And you put whatever you want into it. You can fit freaking K-Series Honda stuff in it. You can go with an older 13B if you're not a fan of the Renesis, or you just like rebuild a Renesis motor, slap it in there, and it's a well-sorted chassis, like for anything you want to do. And the aftermarket's huge. Parts aren't that insane for them. It's a good platform.
So these are Penske 8300s out of an NX5 Cup car. So not directly made for the RX-8. The big question on these is these top hats are made for an NC Miata, not an RX-8. There's been a few other people that have run competition shocks on an RX-8 using NC parts, and basically this right here is too large to fit through that hole right there, and per class rules I can't cut that. So what we're determining now is, will this top hat work, or am I going to have to get something made or machine this down or something else just to make it fit, which hopefully the answer is no. That's not touching. I think so I have no clue who these top hats are from. Mazda Speed made some for a while, and I'm pretty sure the Mazda Speed ones do not fit. I know a few of the other suspension companies were producing them for people running these shocks on this car, and I know that a lot of them did two versions, so I have no idea. There's not really a way to tell, but they fit, and that's all that matters. I guess I'm gonna, just for shits and giggles, bolt in the upper control arm, get the shock actually attached, put the jack under it, cycle it, and just make sure everything clears. I'm not gonna have any, you know, surprises once I actually have these things assembled in the car.
I was autocrossing the RX-8, and I was running a street touring class, which is kind of the low-hanging fruit for if you want something that's kind of modified and go have fun. I basically got tired of that and decided I wanted to go faster. So I went into a street prepared class, which allows slicks and massive suspension modification, stuff like that. Basically realized that I didn't have the money to play that game, and put the car on the back burner until I could, because I'd already modified the car past the point of being able to go back to street touring. So in the meantime, I'm sure you've seen some videos and photos and stuff. I had a turbo Volvo that was a lot of fun.
I go hard in the motherfucking bank, nigga. Nigga stankin', nigga. What the fuck you thinking, nigga? I won't die for this shit, or what the fuck I said. Broad yard, broad day with the SK. See Gucci, that's my motherfucking nigga.
And it kind of killed time while I could wait and do this properly, because I didn't want to half-ass anything on the RX-8.
So you're saying it was cheaper to have fun with a turbo Volvo station wagon than to build a full-on race car RX-8?
It was cheaper and easier to have fun, but not to be competitive. And plus the Volvo, the Volvo wasn't just a toy. I daily drove that thing for 2 years. A year of that, it was boosted, running almost 30 pounds of boost. I put a trailer behind it to tow my motorcycle to track days. I put lumber on the roof racks and went to Home Depot. It was the most useful thing I think I've ever owned. And it would still do cool burnouts and stuff.
See how these top hats are fairly short? Like this height right here, basically from the spring perch to the end of the shock rod, not very tall. And they have these three, you got 2 bolts and the 1 bolt that goes through there to mount it into the chassis. That is an NC Miata one. It's also aluminum. The RX-8 has steel ones, and they have the 3 bolts that mount it to the chassis right there, as well as this bracket up top to basically stabilize it and act as a, you know, kind of like a cross member shock tower brace thing without actually having one. It just uses the chassis to hold the tops. So the big question is that important enough to keep? Will that top hat fit in the car? Will those shock fit with these top hats? Find out next episode. No.
No, we're gonna find out today.
Yeah.
Dude, fuck, get to work, dude.
But yeah, we'll see. One of the things another car that runs this class with these type of shocks has done is they took RX-8 top hats and cut them just below where that top bracket is, left the bracket attached, and then welded in a new flat piece with a monoball. So now it's a monoball instead of a rubber interface. It's shorter so that it can fit these shocks, but still has the reinforcement of the RX-8 top hats. That's a lot of effort. We'll see if it gets that far. Top hat can't move. As the suspension compresses, it goes in and out like that, right? So you have articulation up here. With the rubber and everything, and the spring hits here and stops right here. So basically, like, the spring axis isn't the same as the shock axis throughout the whole, you know, compression stroke of the shock. So one of the big things that you can do to alleviate that is switch to a monoball, like, spherical bearing up here. So at least you don't have the rubber resistance, like torquing the top hat every time something compresses. Sadly, with the spring length being different than the shock length, you can't completely get rid of that torque. It's always gonna, like, basically compress the spring more on one side or the other depending on how it, you know, compresses, and you gain camber and the length of the arms and the arc and all that bullshit. But that's the one downside of the RX-8 rear suspension, is the fact that, like, the top hat drops the spring perch so low. But it works, and you have to deal with it.
The goal is to make it a competitive enough DSP car that I can go to some bigger events other than the local stuff and at least not have the car hold me back. I have no clue if I can drive at that level, but I'm going to try.
So why DSP?
Because it's a lot of fun to drive a car that is, I don't know, like, I don't want to say ridiculously fast, but ridiculously capable. Like, it's a whole different world when you get in the car and you can't, like, you're struggling to find its limits. You're not just trying to, like, find the line to walk to stay within them.
But it's still not a car that's out of reach. You know, anybody can build something to that spec. Well,
Kind of.
But usher in today's projects, you know, with the shocks that you bought, you know, the price that you got them at versus what they should cost, new and...
Exactly. I mean, the big thing with, in my opinion, Street Prepared is one of those really weird autocross classes where you have... they're trying to keep it a street car, but it's really not a street car. You've crossed the line into what should be a race car, but per the rules, you have to keep it streetable. So you end up in this class where you can modify stuff and you can swap out parts for the same stuff that, like, professional race teams are using, but you, like, have to keep all your interior body panels and, you know, stuff like that. It's a really weird transition class, which it's good because it keeps costs down, because it's like you can do whatever you want with suspension, you can do whatever you want with, like, tuning, you can do all that, but you can't basically touch anything inside the block, and you can't modify the chassis itself. So it keeps people from going in and, like, tube chassis stuff and, like, cutting stuff out and building, you know, $10,000 motors to put in these cars. It makes it where you can go spend, you know, 12 grand setting up your suspension, and yeah, it'll make the car faster, but at a point you get there where it's like the chassis is not stiff enough to support it, so there is an upper bound on the spending, which is good for the class and good for competition.
Right. Now let's go back to my tried and true method of how I remove them on the other ones. I don't think that's going to work on this guy. It might need more pressing.
Whoa! Fuck, that was loud.
Yeah.
It worked though.
Something moved.
So I said you can't touch anything inside the motor. You also can't change the aspiration. So you can't go turbo, can't go supercharged, can't go nitrous. I don't think there's any class you can run nitrous in.
But you also can't increase the boost from factory.
Nope, you have to run factory boost levels. Which, yet again, keeps it just where the cost is down. Like, you don't want people out there Because it's like, even though if you say, hey, you can't build your motor, and then people go, okay, well, I can double the boost and I get 2 events out of it, I can just buy a new motor every 2 events. Like, that would be a valid strategy, which still is not in the spirit of the rules, so they're trying to keep you from doing stuff like that.
Alright, that's good.
At the same time, it's like, to be competitive with autocross, suspension is really the biggest thing you can do. So, like with the shocks I'm trying to fit in this car now, they're double adjustable Penske 8300s, which most people I talk to, you say, oh, I got Penske shocks, I don't even know what you're talking about. Because it's the, people think Olin's or, the KW, like Variant 3s and stuff are nice shocks, and like, they don't even hold a candle. You have companies like MCS, Motion Control, Penske, the nice Koni's, like most people don't know that Koni makes race shocks too. Like it's a whole nother world, and basically you get to a point where you're not buying a coilover kit for your car anymore, you're buying a set of Motorsport shocks that you then have to, like top hats, spring perches, all that kind of stuff, you have to figure something out to make it work in your car.
Right, so people that are spending money on KW V3s or something like that, they're buying it because they don't really know, and they're not using a car for that, so they're buying something because the PR was really good.
Exactly.
And the forums say it's really good.
Well, and they are. They're good shocks.
They are good,
they
relatively.
Work. They've put in research to make it work on that particular chassis, but you run into the issue of they're selling it to mass market. They're selling it to people that are streaming their cars. And even on track, shocks don't take the same kind of abuse that they do at autocross. So you can have a setup that works great for HPD stuff, or even some like time trial stuff, but autocross, there's not many people at like a nationally competitive level running an off-the-shelf coilover setup.